We are recording. Welcome, the wine global community. This is Sour Grapes episode number 2. My name is Nick Martinelli. I'm in the Boston market, mostly on-premise wine rep. We've got our Mr. Kowalski. Mike, who are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
You're good. That's good. I like your hat, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
Feeling it with the buffalo plaid, you know?
Yeah. How's Western Mass today?
Western Mass is quiet. It's pretty eerie when if you have to go out and be out on the streets to see nobody in parking lots or anything else like that outside of the supermarket.
A little crazy. Yeah, it's well, I'm quarantining at home here too, so no one's in the vicinity unless you go to the woods. But I wouldn't recommend going to the woods even like at this time, because people are going out there like it's spring break. So go early.
Yeah, but it's nice to hear. Like last night, for the first time, and I don't know how long, I heard some coyotes up on the mountains. So maybe it's not too bad sometimes for nature to be able to do its thing a little bit more.
Awesome. Well, today is our very first special guest, our second show ever, and our first show live ever. This is my good friend Costanza Maag from Verona. She is the owner of Blonde and the Barrel, a broker company she started about, I don't know. Costanza, I'll let you take over.
Hi, everybody. Well, thank you so much for having me on this show. I'm terrible with being on video, so I hope I will be able to speak English still. So yeah, I started my company about 5 years ago, almost 6 now. Time flies. And well, I've been in the industry for a long time, like 20 years. So a little bit like you, Nick, right?
Yeah.
And pretty much the same. And but before, I was always working as an export manager for Valle Reale. That's how we met, in Abruzzo for 8.5 years. And then for Abbazia di Novacella in Alto Adige. So Valle Reale was more like a completely young project when I jumped in, so there was really everything to do from scratch. So it was a big school for me, because I learned from A to Z what needs to be done to build a brand. I did pretty much everything from working in the store to managing the Italian market to the US market and all the international markets. And so that gave me like really the basics. And then from there, I went to a more prestigious winery, more well-known at least, Abbazia di Novacella, which started in 1452, so a long time ago. And then from there, I started my own company. So it was a big challenge, but I hand selected all the wineries that I currently work with, following my idea of wine. So I hope that all the wineries that I represent actually reflect this idea, which in one word I summarize with the word respect. For me, respect means respectful farming, so respect for the environment, respect for the varieties, for the indigenous grapes, respect in the cellar, so that you really have the chance to show the terroir and the place of provenance in the glass, and then also respect for the consumer. So the wines, to me, need to be clean, flawless, and terroir driven. So this is a little bit the idea behind the Blonde and the Barrel. So I selected the wineries, and then someone made me notice that most of my producers are organic or biodynamic. most of them certified, and a few are not certified, but they still do practice organic farming. So at the end, when you start from the glass, and you look for wines that are vibrant and tell you a story, as I like to say, before having to read a brochure, then usually you find out that the wines have very little intervention in the vineyard, very much respect, and don't do too much magic in the cellar.
Well, cool. So, and you're pretty much at the heart of what's going on right now.
I certainly am. Crazy / uncertain times. Well, we went on lockdown before you guys. Your guys are pretty much now at the start of it. And we've been already in Verona. We've been on lockdown for about 10 days now, 12. Yeah, almost 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. And but in Milan, they're already like over a month.
Wow.
So, and the situation is not really getting any better because, as you said, it's a little bit the same in Italy as it is the spring break thing that you were mentioning before. So people do not understand that it's not like a trend. Oh, hey, let's all stay home for a change. It's really for your own and people's safety. So you can't, if you keep going out and you keep not respecting the restrictions, the virus keeps spreading. And in some cities, it's really like out of control right now because the hospitals don't have enough masks and enough, even like the machines, like, I don't know how to say it in English, for like a breathing equipment and all these things. So, and even like, you know, if they have to bury the bodies, they have to go to other communes because there is no space in the cemeteries anymore. So it's really, really out of control. So me, I'm staying home. I'm not going out. I'm lucky enough to be in the heart of the city, in the heart of Verona. So the grocery stores are still open, some of them. So I still get my fresh groceries, and I do have enough wine. I was cleaning my cellar today. I'm doing all the things that you never have time to do. So I pulled out everything from my cantina and I cleaned it, and luckily I had some help. And now everything is in place, and I found out that I really do have a year of independence. I don't have to buy wine. I can be in quarantine for a year. Hopefully that's not the case.
How many bottles did you dig up?
I didn't really count them, but in the cellar I think I have something like 700 bottles, plus about 300 in my house, and then I have still about 300 plus at my mom's house.
I think about a year, you know.
Your age?
Yeah. 2 bottles a day.
Exactly.
Right, for other people. Yeah. Well, they're going to learn their lesson once they go home and find their parents and their grandparents and their neighbors.
Oh, man. Cool. So,
for you, Costanza.
Yes.
I know here in the U.S., a lot of my friends back in Napa, they're starting to see bud break. Do you see this starting to maybe affect wine production for this year, with, you know, focus needing to be had a little bit more in the vineyard starting about now?
Well, in the vineyards, they're still working. Of course, with all the precautions, and of course they're basically, the winemakers are doing their in the vineyard and in the cellar. So not like you can stop the seasons, right? Everybody is very, very concerned, because the thing is that in September you start harvesting, in August probably, because it was quite warm, and then you have to bottle the vintages, and you know, and then you have to sell the wine. And now with all the stores and restaurants on lockdown, what do we do? You know, that's also my concern, because I'm not really indispensable. I mean, I do a lot of education. I'm a good help for the wineries, but it's not just the Italian market, it's the international markets. So we will see once everything is over, and we still don't know when it's going to be, what's going to happen, because we're going to see who's going to stand, who will have to close, because they will not be able to afford to keep the business going. And so really it's a time of big uncertainty, but I mean, of course, I have a lot of time to think right now. So I also think that this situation is putting us all kind of like on the same boat. So really, we are realizing how every business is connected to the other. It's not just one industry, the other industry. It's all of us being connected, and we should really take advantage of this and try to get rid of all other preconcepts and start to think about new collaborations, about new opportunities, about also reinventing ourselves. Everything really is possible right now, I have the impression. And so we have to try to take the good out of this situation. It's difficult. I mean, I'm not sleeping at night too well, so, but we need to try to find new ways. I mean, it's not like the world is shutting down. We have to think about the future as well. So certainly online, like the technology will come to help, because people won't be traveling anytime soon. So we have to think about taking. So also like this show, you know, bring in education to people's houses, and maybe bringing wine to people's houses. This is, yeah.
That's
so
all the more reason that we're so happy to have you on with us today.
Yes, I'm happy to be honest. Thank you so much.
Sure. So before we get into the wine we're going to talk about, just a warning to us people over here. We should definitely stay inside, not go out. And if we are going to go outside, you know, even if it's in the woods, if it looks like spring break in the woods, get out of the woods, come back home. Right?
It's not a vacation.
Nope, not a vacation. We're trying to survive here.
Yeah. We need to stay safe and stay healthy, because we will need all our strength very soon.
Okay, so we were gonna talk about a particular winery today from the Veneto. We can go right into that if you like.
Absolutely. So we will speak a little bit about a quite slippery topic, which is Prosecco, because when we speak about Prosecco, we really get into like a field where nobody has it very a clear idea of what we're talking about, because there is so much Prosecco out there, and some really good Proseccos and some really bad ones that you can't even make spritz out of it. So it's really difficult sometimes for the average consumer, most of all, to understand when you're buying Prosecco on a shelf, where it comes from, what it is, how it was made, what it's going to taste like. So usually the average Prosecco that we know is the DOC Prosecco. So when you see on the label Prosecco DOC, without the final G, so Prosecco DOC exactly. This can come from all of Friuli. So imagine the whole region is allowed to produce Prosecco. So to grow glera for Prosecco. Glera is the grape with which you make Prosecco. And then also big chunk of Veneto. So mainly the Treviso area. So Prosecco DOC usually comes from grapes grown on the flat land. You can pretty much grow it everywhere, and you can still make Prosecco out of it. The winemaking process is the Charmat method, so autoclave, and usually mostly like the big company that make like a really cheap Prosecco. They do also very brief fermentations, because you can really make Prosecco in a few days if you wish. Usually that Prosecco is, it can be pleasant. I mean, there are like some good DOC Proseccos out there, fresh, not too complicated. Usually they have a little bit of residual sugar. Some have a lot of residual sugar, because Glera already itself has a lot of fruit forward notes, so it's easy to make a very sweet Prosecco, so to say. Then we have another DOC Prosecco area that the consortium created, this appellation to narrow down quality-wise the DOC Prosecco, which is the DOC Treviso. So when you see DOC Treviso Prosecco, it comes from quite large area, but it's definitely much smaller. It's only in the Veneto, it's only the province of Treviso. And in this case, you have a little more control on the grapes of that produce the Prosecco. On the grapes and on the area. Some producers are growing the grapes of Glera for the DOC Treviso on what used to be the riverbed of the River Piave. So you still have, even though in the flatland, you still have a quite interesting soil that gives a little more minerality to the wine. This is the craze of Case Paolin, the wineries that we are speaking about today. Well, what I have in the hand, it's I'll open it in a few minutes. It's the Colfondo, which is a very unique product, but they also make a DOC Treviso, and they're growing their grapes on the riverbed of the River Piave. So that's mineral DOC Treviso. Case Paolin, to speak a little bit. Oh, sorry, I finished the thing about the areas. Then we have the two DOCGs, the Conegliano Valdobbiadene, and the Asolo Prosecco and Colli Asolani. Asolo Prosecco is the smallest of the two DOCGs. Conegliano Valdobbiadene is a little larger. It takes about 4 communes, and we're talking about 7,800 hectares of vineyards, whereas the Asolo Prosecco is about 2,400 hectares, so much smaller. It's about a third. And here is really where you start finding magic in the Prosecco. So here you start speaking about altitude. Here you start speaking about soils. So it becomes much interesting. Today we will speak about the Asolo Prosecco, which is the word, the complete name of the appellation would be Asolo and Montello and Colli Asolani. So Montello is really what makes the difference in the Asolo Prosecco. Montello is a hill. It's not very high in altitude, because it's a little over 200 meters. So it's not a high elevation mount, although they call it a mountain. It's more like a hill. But the soil there is very unique, because it's very rich in iron. So it's a very mineral. It used to come from, it's alluvial soil, basically, very rich in iron. And some clay. So in that case, the grapes of Glera that are grown on this hill will have definitely a completely different taste, much more mineral, much more full-bodied, much more complex. So this is, as you can see from already the video on the website, this is of course what we're talking about today. So we're talking about the Case Paolin, which is a family-owned estate that the family has always been growing vines, and they, in the 70s, they were still selling grapes to larger co-ops, and then in the 80s they started bottling with their own label. and they're now in their third generation. It's now run by three brothers that you just saw and that you see now in the pictures. They are each of one of the brothers has its own role. One is in the vineyards, one is in the cellar, and that one is dealing more with the administration and paperwork and all this logistics. And they are a winery that works 100% organic. So we go back to what I was saying before, respectful farming. Also because two of the three families still live there, and they have their kids growing there, so they want the waters to be clean, and they want them to live in a clean environment. So this is the main reason. And then of course the respect for the grapes, which makes a lot more mixed quality ones, more vibrant ones. They have two lines of wines. One is their entry-level wines, the DOC Treviso that I mentioned before, that comes from the grapes around the winery on alluvial soil, on the riverbed of the River Piave, and then they also make a Cabernet. And then on the Montello, that's where it becomes more interesting, because in this case we have the Asolo Prosecco DOCG and the Colfondo that we're tasting today. And then they also have a vineyard of Manzoni Bianco. I call the vineyard, as in Burgundy they would call it a clos monopole, because it's basically a vineyard of their own property, surrounded by walls and fences. So it's really their little corner, a very small vineyard that makes amazing wines. And then they do have also some red grapes that they grow, Merlot, Cabernet, and some Carmenere. Actually, it's interesting that they're making red wine because in this area, you always think about Prosecco and white wines, white sparkling wines. Not really, it's not your first thought, red wines in the Veneto, and most of all in the Asolo and Montello hills. But what happens is that this area was really the first area in Italy where the French brought international varietals to international, I mean French varietals. Now we call them international, but we should say French varietals. And so there is a very old tradition of producing red wines and Bordeaux blends in this area, even before Bulgari was even a thing. So that's why they decided to maintain the tradition of producing red wines. The reason of Carmenere is because in the past they thought that it was Cabernet Franc. So they were confusing Carmenere with Cabernet Franc. I see you're nodding. Like,
yeah, between the Cab Franc and Merlot, Carmenere
right.
just kind of went everywhere.
Exactly. So but yeah, so now I'm gonna first of all uncork the Colfondo, because before uncorking it, I'm gonna do this. That's why I waited. So this is Asolo Prosecco DOCG Colfondo. So Colfondo literally means with sediments. I'm gonna uncork it with a bottle opener, although with the next vintage, it's gonna be probably a mushroom cork, but for now it's still Spago, and so I'm gonna do this. And so Colfondo means with sediments. So what changes compared to the Asolo Prosecco DOCG is that in this case, we have not a Charmat method winemaking, but it's a Champenois method. It's basically a pet net. So it's first fermentation in stainless steel tanks and with indigenous yeast. And then the second fermentation happens in the bottle. In this case, they don't use indigenous yeast, but they use neutral selected yeast, only because they want to be sure that the fermentation goes till the end. And then it's not disgorged. So with sediments means that the yeast remains in the bottle. So you will have a Prosecco that is cloudy. Case Paolin lets the wine make some malolactic fermentation in some vintages. Usually the vintages that have a little more acidity, the cooler vintages, but it's never a full malolactic fermentation. It's always like a partial mallow, because what's really important to them is that you will still have like those apple, almost like cider notes, which makes it kind of funky, but never too funky. It's never gonna be like almost a rotten apple, or like a cooked apple. It's a fresh, almost like a Granny Smith on the nose. Zero dosage. So for the second fermentation, there is no sugar added. So it's gonna be super dry, and the bubbles are very, very fine. It's a frizzante, so the pressure is not super high, and it's really a wine that can be paired with food very easily. Has this lovely acidity that rinses your palate, so it's a really fun wine.
So, Costanza, you mentioned the word pet nats, which seems to be a fairly popular thing in the market these days for lots of different countries to make that sort of style of sparkling wine. But is it common to see a lot of pet nats Prosecco, or is this a very unique kind of wine here?
Well, this is really the traditional way of making Prosecco. So this is how they used to make Prosecco before Prosecco became such a big thing internationally. So it's really how the small producer or the families used to make Prosecco. So you can find quite a bit of Corfondo. Still not that many, because of course it's a longer process. It's a more expensive process. And so people, of course, with Prosecco prefer to make the easy, fast way Prosecco and produce a lot of it and sell it at a cheaper price, but sell a lot of it. In this case, of course, the margins are much smaller because you're still competing, with other Proseccos, and so you have to educate the consumer to drink in different Prosecco. Okay. So it's still a battle.
Sure. One more question I have, because you're doing it with that natural yeast secondary fermentation, does it lend this style of Prosecco to potentially aging, whereas most of the other ones done in Charmat method don't necessarily lend themselves to it as much?
It ages very well. It ages very well. Of course, we promote it in small corners of the market, because talking about verticals of Prosecco. Although I think that it could be interesting for journalists. We should start launching that also with journalists to do when we'll have a little more vintages available. We probably should do that, because it's really interesting. I did like a small vertical up to 07, and it was really interesting. Yeah, because it ages very well. Of course, you will start having a little more evoluted notes and a little more nutty notes, but it still maintains this freshness, and it's really interesting.
Nice.
Good question.
So what we got next? The Manzoni Bianco?
Yep. Absolutely, Manzoni Bianco. I have it here in the back. I must confess that I already poured myself some, because I wanted to do the little game with the Corfondo. So.
Too tasty not to open.
Right, and it has screw cap. So if you don't finish a bottle, which is not the case here, but if you don't finish the bottle, you can put it back in the fridge easily.
Nice.
So yeah, Costa degli Angeli is Incrocio Manzoni, or Manzoni Bianco. So Manzoni Bianco is a grape that is quite interesting, because it's a cross. It's a genetic cross between Riesling and Pinot Blanc. So it's a cross that was made by Professor Manzoni, professor in the winemaking and enology school of Conegliano, Valdobbiadene, and he basically crossed the flowers, so through impollination of the two grape varieties. So if you think, I mean, it was the end of the 19th century. So that's when a lot of experiments were made with Riesling. Think of Kerner, think of Müller-Thurgau, and other varieties that are crossed with Riesling. And in this case, it's Riesling and Pinot Blanc. So we have two varieties that age very well and that have very strong personality, I would say. So by crossing them, you have a varietal that produces wines that are very complex, very intriguing, and that age very, very well. So as it often happens with varieties that are a cross of Riesling and in the beginning, right now, you still, this is a I have a 2016 vintage here. You start with notes that are a little more leaning towards the Pinot Bianco. With the aging, you will have a little more of the petrol notes and of the Riesling notes, definitely. This wine ages only in stainless steel, but it spends about 6 months on the lees. So it has this nice richness on the palate and creaminess, but then you have a lovely minerality. The vineyard is the one that I mentioned before, so it's the little clos on the Montello, so the soil is very rich in iron, so you definitely have this nice minerality to it.
I'd like to say that this is only the second Incroce Manzoni I've had. You know, the other one that many people might know in the U.S. is the one made by Nino Negri, Lombardia. I have to say that,
yes.
No offense to Nino Negri or Frederick Wildman now, but this one's a lot better.
Yeah, it's different. It's different style. It's a different approach. It's a different terroir.
What?
So that's what I like. You know, the fact that tasting Incrocio Manzoni coming from Montello and tasting Incrocio Manzoni coming from Valtellina and tasting Incrocio Manzoni coming from Trentino, you will. I mean, another popular Incrocio Manzoni that you find in the market, in the U.S. market, is the one produced by Foradori in Trentino.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but again, completely different approach. So more evolved, more, you know, different style. So here, really, I mean, Case Paolin really seeks freshness and cleanness. So where they don't macerate, they want like fresh, enjoyable, immediate wines.
Okay.
But that age very well. So this I tasted some older vintages, and this ages really well.
Ooh.
Even with, I mean, maybe even better with the screw cap.
Sure.
Okay, that's another topic. We should do a show just talking about the closures of wine.
Yeah.
We'll definitely schedule one for that. And then we've got one more wine to showcase here.
And then then we have the San Carlo. And here we have definitely a wine that is Bordeaux blend. So we have Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and a little bit of Cabernet Franc, mainly Merlot. This is, people are sometimes a little scared about trying international varieties from different regions, because now mostly like the people in the industry, I mean, I also see myself, I'm always curious about trying indigenous varieties. So let me see something that I can't find elsewhere. And so there is always like this curiosity about seeking what I can't find elsewhere. Luckily, because in the 90s it was completely the opposite. So I'm happy that we're doing this research on international varieties and being all geeky about it. But I think that you understand a terroir sometimes better by tasting an international or French variety, because we all have our own idea of that variety, because everyone at some point tasted it from somewhere. And so if there is not, of course, too much magic happening in the cellar, you can actually, by tasting a Merlot coming from different regions or Chardonnay coming from different regions in different areas of the world, you can definitely understand the terroir. Because with the variety, with an indigenous variety, you don't have any way to compare it to somewhere else because it's only grown there. I mean, Ciliegiolo, okay, you have the Tuscany, you have Umbria, but you know, maybe someone in California is probably producing Ciliegiolo. That could be. They produce like Rhine, so why not Ciliegiolo? But you know, with a Merlot, you really can say, okay, how does the soil, how does the climate impact the variety? And so that's why I'm a big fan of the San Carlo, to be honest, because in this case, yeah, of course, it's Merlot, it's Cabernet Sauvignon, it's Cabernet Franc, and it spends about 24 months in Tonneau. Okay, but I get the iron, I get the salinity, I get the spice, I get that terroir that is unique.
Yeah.
And I think
how would you compare, because I know for me, Italians are always great at working with all sorts of varietals, especially the internationals. How would you compare the San Carlo to, you know, something that's known from the IGT Toscana, you know, those super Tuscans that are coming out from Tuscany?
Well, in Bolgheri, for instance, the super Tuscans, they do get the influence from the sea. So you have a salinity that comes almost more from the environment than from the soil. It's a warmer environment. You're farther south, so you have hotter days. I mean, now with the climate change, even talking about climate is gonna become a challenge. But
Sure.
for now, it's still it's still something that we can talk about. And here we are in Veneto. We are not too far from the sea, but we don't really get the influence from the sea. We have higher temperature swings for sure. And we have a soil that has clay and a lot of iron. So you definitely have two different locations. And then, of course, also the idea of the winemaker, that also, of course, impacts the wine. I see that also in Bolgheri right now, they're using the oak in a more lighter way in order to really let the variety speak for itself. So there are some really interesting things in Bolgheri, but I think that blind tasting, you would definitely see that they're not coming from the same area. Plus now in Bolgheri, they're starting to put some Sangiovese in the blend, which is also pretty exciting, but it's definitely different.
So you'd say the San Carlo is in general maybe a little leaner,
lean mineral, yeah, high acidity, yes.
Oh, wonderful. That was a good run. So we've got about 5 minutes left or so because I have a free Zoom and I should probably upgrade it. But if
I speak too much, I know.
it's a great thing.
I'm gonna train in front of
opportunity for everybody.
No, it's wonderful. It's so awesome to have you on, Costanza, and we're definitely going to have you again to talk about your other wineries in your portfolio at some point very soon as well. But if there's anyone who joined in that has a question right now, you can raise your hand. You know, there's a little button, or you can type it in the chat. If no one raises their hand, then I'm gonna ask about what music you're listening to lately. What's been on your Spotify or your vinyl player? Do you have a record player?
I do. I do. But yeah, I'm Spotifying a lot lately. I have the same approach with the music that I have with wine. Mm-hmm. So I don't listen just to one type of music. So I'm very moody with my wine and with my music as well. So right now I'm going from Queen of the Stone Age to Tupac.
There you go.
I'm old school. So this is one thing that is like the feel good also for music. I like jazz. I'm listening to a lot of jazz and also classical music, because I come from a music background, and my father was an orchestra conductor, so
Wow.
I do listen to a lot of classical music as well. But right now, mostly when I have to clean my house, now that I have so much time to do it, and myself, I'm more into like grunge or old school rock, yeah, or hip hop, but old school. I don't like the new stuff.
Fair enough.
Awesome. Well,
How
Costanza,
about you?
what?
How about you?
Me? Oh,
What are
well,
you listening to?
well, yeah, I'm totally Spotify freak, but this week it's been The Stranglers, a old late 70s UK pop punk band, and I think maybe Frank Zappa for good measure, because he's
Nice,
he's
nice.
wacky and weird, and these are
Yeah,
wacky.
I think it's fitting for the times to be listening to Zappa.
How about you?
I've been on a really big funk kick lately. The Meters in particular. If you guys have been watching Ugly Delicious, which the new season just came out, Sissy Strut is like a really popular song by the Meters that they play there, and it's got a really good vibe to it.
What's the show called?
Ugly Delicious.
Okay. Is it on Netflix or on what?
It is. Curious
Okay.
to whether you guys get it over there.
Well, we have Netflix. I don't watch TV. That's the thing. I mean, I'm starting now, but I still watch movies rather than actually watching series. So I'm I'm pulling out my old DVDs. I'm such an old lady. So
Ain't nothing
embarrassing.
wrong with that.
We can't do this part.
What, any particular movie this week, or what do you?
Well, I've been watching, actually. I rewatched Argo. I rewatched Slevin, like old stuff. Yesterday night I was watching Woody Allen.
There you go.
Yeah. So I'm looking at my old DVDs and what I have, and so
Wonderful. So I think this has been a pretty cool show for our second show to have you with us today, our first guest.
Yeah, I'm honored.
No, we are. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your knowledge in these beautiful wines.
Thank you. I'm sorry that you didn't have to. No, you had something to do.
Well, I had something from the region, but nothing from Asolo. I have a Valdobbiadene, which actually I did want to ask you. I asked a similar question about, the Sao Carlo, the difference between the Toscana IGT and there. What would you say defines the Asolo DOCG from the Valdobbiadene DOCG?
Well, Valdobbiadene, sorry. I was pronouncing.
My apologies.
No, but the funny thing is that I was pronouncing it wrong too. The Valdobbiadene has something that we don't have in Asolo, which is the altitude. So they have a higher and steeper hills for sure, and different exposures. Because of course, if you go to Valdobbiadene, it's really incredible how steep and how varied the environment is, and that's really like, and the forest surrounding the vineyard is really fascinating. So you have a little more of the altitude, so a little higher temperature swings, but you don't have all the iron that you have in the soil in Asolo. So you will probably have a little more minerality in Asolo than you get, and a little more structure than you actually get in Valdobbiadene. Valdobbiadene, they have the Cartizze, which is quite interesting because it's a very high elevation. Although the trend is to harvest a week later, so sometimes you do have the acidity and the freshness because of the temperature swings, and also the fact that the grapes actually age on the plant, so you have more minerality. But at the same time, you will have more residual sugar but that's a style that they decided on. When you drink the drier ones, they're actually pretty fun to drink. Yeah.
Groovy. Well, this has been a treat again. We will do this again. Mike and I want to say thank you.
Grazie.
So formal. You and I have been friends forever. And thank you for coming to Boston. Otherwise, I wouldn't have these bottles in front of me.
Right. Thank you for pouring so little at the show.
Oh, no problem.
Well, thank you so much, guys. That was fun.
Thank you. And for everybody watching, thank you again for tuning in. If you have any questions, again, related to Costanza's wine, the region in general, please reach out and let us know. And also let us know what you might like to see in future episodes.
Yeah, ditto. I feel like I'm Demi Moore and you're Patrick Swayze.
There we go. It's all about the lip.
All right, Sour Grapes signing off. See you next time, folks.
Ciao. Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.